Hello, everyone. My name is Mike del Ferro. I'm live from Amsterdam, and I'm really delighted to be here. Thanks to wonderful Gail Boyd to invite me on this show. I'm a jazz pianist from Amsterdam. Um, my dad was an opera singer, so I grew up with jazz and with classical music and opera. And I started playing piano when I was around 9 years old. And because I have a very classical background, so to speak, of course, it was kind of obvious that I would become a classical pianist. And I started playing Bach, Mozart, Beethoven, the usual, the usual what you do if you're young and you start playing classical piano. And at some point, um, I realized that no, I love classical music. I really adore classical music. To the day of today, I actually still do a lot of. I flirt with classical projects, classical related projects, but at the same time, I always thought, no matter how young I was really young. I thought, why am I always playing stuff which is written? Why can't I just simply create my own music? And then when I discovered jazz, I'll go deeper into this. Then I realized, okay, this is what I want to do. I want to be able to create music on the spot. And of course, jazz is maybe one of the most amazing tools to do this, the freedom of speech, musical speech, the freedom of improvisation, the rhythms, the harmonies. And that's why I basically became, that was the main reason to become a jazz musician. Before I continue, I I do a lot of live streams. Well, I did, especially during COVID, and I do a lot of seminars as well. I have also a course for musicians called Self Management for Musicians. And in a situation like this where I'm not being interviewed, it's really nice to have some more interaction. So please, if you have any questions or comments, please write them down. I'm reading them here right off the screen, and I'll be happy to answer your questions. Thanks, Gail, for being for the invite again. And yeah, so to go a little bit deeper into this, how I changed my musical life and how it all happened. So my father, despite being an opera singer, he was kind of open to jazz. And once there was this rainy Sunday afternoon here in Amsterdam, and the Dutch television showed a movie about Scott Joplin, the ragtime pianist. And that was actually maybe the first time that I heard the piano being played in a very different way. With the left hand, and I heard the entertainer and the maple leaf rag and all that beautiful stuff, and I was totally mesmerized by it. And I remember, we already had a video recorder, an old one, with the old tapes, and I recorded it and watched it every time. And then I bought a book in the actually the music, and I started practicing. And then I was totally actually obsessed with this music, especially because of the rhythm, the swing, that thing. And then my dad, who was kind of, he was open. He thought he realized, like, he is having much more fun playing this than playing Mozart, Chopin, Beethoven, and all the other incredible composers. Because again, my respect and love for classical music is still here, especially the respect, discipline of classical musicians. It's totally amazing. So it's and I go frequently to classical concerts. I've got a lot of classical musicians among my friends, so it's not something I pushed away. The contrary. But playing, I prefer what I'm doing. So my dad realized, like, hey, he really loves this stuff, and he loved Oscar Peterson. And then here in Amsterdam at the Concertgebouw, our famous theater here, Oscar Peterson played a night concert, which started like I don't know, like 12:30 a.m. So after the regular orchestra, Oscar Peterson played there with Ed Thigpen and Niels Henning Østers Petersen. And my dad bought tickets, and I went to that concert, and then I was totally then I knew what I wanted to become. Really wanted to become a jazz pianist, and then I really became serious about playing the piano. So I started playing everything from the records, like most jazz musicians do. You start with playing off the records and transpose, transcribe, all of that, and then but I still had a classical teacher who was quite conservative. He didn't like jazz, and then I decided to quit. And then I found a great Dutch jazz pianist who already passed away many years ago. And he was not known, but he was an incredible teacher and a fantastic jazz pianist. Henk Elkerbout was his name, for those of you who speak Dutch. And well, he really guided me through a lot of stuff. And then here in Amsterdam, we had one of the first conservatories with a jazz department. It's still there now. It's a huge international faculty. But at that time, with my generation, I was still like, we were like the guinea pig generation. So it was mainly, older jazz musicians, teachers who had a job there. But I learned a lot. So and then also, I met other musicians and of course other jazz musicians. But at the same time, here in Amsterdam, already then we have a colonial history with Suriname and the Dutch Antilles. And Suriname is the country which is in South America. It's north of Brazil, in between the two Guianas, the French and British Guiana. And we have a huge Surinamese community here in Holland. And every week they hosted a jam session or a couple of Surinamese musicians. So I went there and I started playing with them, and I made a lot of friends there. Actually, it also established a great connection with Suriname. I go there very frequently, and then but they, of course, their rhythms, which is more like, I wouldn't say um, uh, Latin, but they have their own rhythms. But it's, of course, in that part of the world, uh, where you hear a lot of influence from Cuban music and salsa. So that's where also my big love for Latin jazz, samba, salsa, everything related to that started. So that was another dimension to uh, next to playing jazz. So that's how I started developing, and then I started playing gigs here and there in Amsterdam already during my conservatory time. And so already when I graduated, I already had quite some playing experience. And um, well, a couple of things happened, because the thing was, and that's also why I want to mention my let's say the music business side which I have, because I already realized at a very young age, and I'm talking about my early 20s, that you start playing gigs, you start playing jazz, the music we love, otherwise you wouldn't be watching this show. And then I realized at some point, like, wow, this is not music for the millions. uh, you start playing, you realize, wow, this is only really a niche. At that time the word didn't exist, but it's a niche thing. And so if I want to be able to make a living out of playing this music, I should not only see Amsterdam or the Netherlands as the place to work, but the world, because I figured that if worldwide you would have uh, many opportunities to play, that would then you can make a living out of this. And it turned out to be true. So I already had this mindset of traveling, playing the world, and I also had the advantage as opposed to my father, who was an artist, but we was the type who wrote phone numbers on the wallpaper, and I realized this is not the way how to do it. So I realized, like, if I want to make a career in music, playing jazz, the music I love, then I have to be organized. So I was already very conscious with like with business card filing them, and so the whole thing about the music business side, being organized. I can go much deeper into this, but I also have a podcast now, and I have this course. I'll talk about a little bit more later. Um, uh, Also, was kind of the reason that I started playing internationally, and it basically started with hooking up with foreign musicians. There was a musician, a great saxophone player from Belgium. His name is Frank Waganet, and now he is the artistic director of the Brussels Jazz Orchestra. we we met, we got friends, we played a couple of concerts. So he started organizing concerts in Belgium, which is next to the Netherlands. I got some gigs here in Amsterdam and in Holland. And so that's how we got on each other's radar screen in terms of countries. And then I was incredibly lucky that, thanks to Frank, I played at the Belgium festival where Toots Tielemans was playing, the legendary harmonica player. And he heard me. I didn't realize he was there, but he heard me. And long story short, because we only have half an hour and it's already almost 12 minutes, I ended up playing with Toots for 10 years all over the world. And this was, of course, still, I see this as the gig of my life. Um, Let me quickly see, because I see there's something written here in the comments. Um, what is the most important thing that a musician needs to manage him herself? Well, you know, well, I mean, this is a whole clinic on its own, the whole self management and networking thing. But a career in music, a successful career in music, means 200%. It's 100% artistry. Try to take your music to the highest possible level. And that's what I'm still doing to the day of today. Before this session, I practiced for 2 hours. And the other 100% is mentality. Because, you know, let me put it like this: if a great musician, a great artist does not work, it's 99% because of a mentality problem. It can be that you show up late, or not being reliable, don't prepare the music, maybe you have a bad temper, you're difficult. So if you're one of those artists who is really seriously aiming for a career, I always suggest to do an honest introspection with yourself and think like, well, am I always on time? Am I 100% reliable in every way? Am I flexible? As a pianist, you play at, pianist horror sometimes. You go to a gig and the piano's terrible, out of tune, it's just old, whatever. Maybe you have a bad sound engineer. Zillion things can happen. But if you always stay flexible, you're cooperative and try to make the best out of it, um, that's gonna um, appreciate make people appreciate you. And um, and when you have a good reputation, people will call you. But if you fail in one of those departments, it can really go wrong. So that's so it's the artistry and the mentality which really have to go hand in hand. And the other thing, of course, when it comes to manage yourself as an artist, is to be very well organized. Like I said before, I already started collecting business cards um, when I was starting. So now, to date, I have a database of like 30,000 people worldwide. And that's not only promoters, that can be a bass player, or it can be a photographer, a graphic designer, whatever, but I filed everything. And again, please listen to my podcast. There's a whole chapter on this. So it's like having your database together and writing down stuff all the time, which is key. Otherwise, you're going to forget it. And maybe the most important thing also is because sometimes I know that um, artists, students kind of um, resist this whole music business part, and which is understandable sometimes because in all honesty, sometimes like I'm going on tour next week to Asia, and I have people there arranging stuff for me, but it involves 3 countries, so I have to coordinate a lot of stuff and things like that. So I'm sitting behind the computer a couple hours a day to get this going. uh, Acquisition, I still do this. And but the most important thing here is, if most of us musicians, we have a favorite part of the day when we're musically most inspired, when we love to practice. Maybe you're a morning person, an afternoon person, evening person. It doesn't matter. But what I strongly recommend to do is always save those moments for your music, and don't sacrifice those precious moments for anything else. Because if you're going to sacrifice those precious couple hours of practice every day for sitting behind your computer trying to get gigs or other stuff, I mean, I'm not here to tell you how to run your life, but if you sacrifice this for anything else, at the end of the day, you're going to be frustrated. That terrible feeling of, oh, I didn't practice, and that adds up and adds up, and that's a bad thing. So I always suggest stay focused on the music, and those precious moments, always reserve those for the moments. Switch off your phone, that you're not distracted, and then at least, and then the other many hours of the day, you can work on the whole networking thing. So that's something I strongly recommend. um all right, back a little bit to the music. Uh, so I was playing in Belgium, and Toots kind of heard my music, Toots Tielemans. I ended up playing with him for 10 years. And this was really the gig of my life. I mean, you know, what for me was maybe still, the most amazing thing about it is um, that it's a once in a lifetime opportunity to play with a pioneer, because Toots was a pioneer. He took the harmonica and created all this music from scratch, from nothing. There was nothing there. He didn't have a reference point. I mean, of course, there was a blues tradition with the harmonica, but nobody really played it so melodically, with jazz harmonies and all of that. So he was a real pioneer and a genius. So if you have the opportunity to spend 10 years with this man on and off, but I played a lot with him. I think because when he passed away in 2016, I realized I played around 200 concerts with him worldwide. And we went to Japan, for instance, for 3 weeks. We played all the blue notes, and you're sitting next to this man, in trains, in buses, on airplanes, and he's telling all these stories uh, about music. He played with Charlie Parker. I mean, so the knowledge, the experience, what I learned from this man was totally unbelievable. And um, uh, yeah, and I'm so grateful for this. And of course, musically, I learned so much. I mean, he was totally master in playing ballads, and still, because when he was aging, he couldn't play that fast anymore, because he was still playing when he was like in his late 80s. But the ballads were also always so incredibly beautiful. And another big thing I learned was that being an accompanist in this case, um, to me, still to today, to me has the same value than being there, playing a good solo or being in the spotlight. But if you have the unique opportunity to work with a genius like that, and he calls you to and because he wants, I try to make him sound better, with the way I play piano, and I use the keyboards as well, and and I saw him on stage being happy when he heard, and of course the whole band, I mean, I'm not talking about myself, but the whole rhythm section, and that was such a joy, and I really, the value of accompanying, also for me, it means the same as being a good soloist. Um, so yeah, that's about Toots. Another experienced musician I've been very blessed to play with. Uh, well, experience is not the word. An iconic musician is Jack DeJohnette, the drummer. Um, um, Jack and I became very good friends because of actually because of a family thing. It's a story on its own, but uh, I've been knowing Jack for many, many years, and been very grateful to also play with him a couple of times, and uh, meeting all these amazing musicians he's always surrounded with. And he also taught me a lot of stuff. Of course, he's a great pianist. Um, Plays all instruments. I mean, the drums goes without saying, of course, but of course, also like, you know, a musician who really changed the way people play the drums. So, also pioneering actually. So I've been very blessed with to be, well, playing and experiencing those people. Um, yeah. Um, let's see, because Gil did send me some questions, so I'm taking a look here. The 8 minutes we still have. Um, yeah, any advice I would like to give to young musicians? Well, you know, um, everything in which is related to music, and I think especially to jazz, is thing of patience. You know, it takes a long time to master your instrument or your voice, whatever you do, and the same goes for the career in music. I mean, unless you're like a superstar, which all of a sudden pops on this on the scene, like an Esperanza Spalding or a Jacob Collier, people like that, all of a sudden are there, and within 1 year they're world famous. That's um, it's great, but that's very exceptional. It's very rare, and no matter your level of playing, um, the patience is a very important thing here. And be persistent, never give up. These are tips I give to young musicians, aspiring musicians, because sometimes it can be discouraging, and I also, in all honesty, think that nowadays, uh, with all the things we have, the whole online thing. On one hand, the internet is amazing. I mean, I'm sitting here in Amsterdam, you know, in my little room here, talking to you, and everybody in the world can see it. We all know the benefits of the internet, but I mean, there's also a downside of, people being. I think the internet causes a lot of anxiety, especially for musicians. Like, like, to give you an example, I've got it myself. um I had a track, or it's still there, and it got um on a on one of those official Spotify playlists, and it got 1.5 million streams. It's a solo piano recording of Someday My Prince Will Come. You can check it on my Spotify profile. And and I was over the moon, and it's still there, and it's still being played. And of course, I had the app, the stats, and refreshing them, every day. And oh, so many listeners. Oh, and it was growing and growing. And then what happened is that the track is still on the playlist, but they really moved it down, or maybe new tracks came. It's still there. And then my my streams dropped with like 100%. So I had like around 50,000 listeners a month, and it dropped down to like, I think now it's like 19,000, which is like, and then I realized, and I got upset about it, and stressed, and I've to, and then I go like, that's also, that's really, if you look back a little bit, step back and try to look at on this objectively, it's also a ridiculous thing, of course, to, so the whole social media thing, stats, uh, plays, likes, that whole thing causes a lot of anxiety. So finding your balance with the internet for everybody, of course, in the world, but especially musicians, sensitive souls as we are, is a very delicate thing, and something you really have to work on. That's also something I advise. Um, and yeah, a little bit again, regarding my course, my podcast. Well, the thing is, I've been giving this course about networking, self management for many years. I The thing is that um, I did everything myself. I built a career for myself. I had some lucky moments like Toots and all of that. But if you play with a big star like Toots Tielemans, it doesn't mean that, I mean, some doors will open, but everybody was so focused on Toots, you know, which is which was right, because he was the genius, the star. But then it's like, oh, what a nice pianist. What's his name again? So it doesn't mean that because you play with such a big name, everything goes by itself. You still have to really find your own spot in this jungle of music. And uh, yeah, and I did, you know, and then like 10 years ago, we had a jazz seminar here in the Netherlands, and because I'm considered to be one of the most traveling Dutch musicians, and I travel to an average of 20 countries every year, and to date I've played in over 100 countries. Um, there's also another reason, because I worked for a cultural organization, and they send me around as a kind of ambassador to do a lot of fusion, a lot of crossover with traditional music. So I've also been to a lot of uncommon places, also incredible experience. That's something I can also talk about for hours. Um, and but and also actually working on a podcast, another podcast channel, to share all my travel stories and all these incredible experiences worldwide. But the networking thing, um, I yeah. So they asked me to talk about, like, Mike, can you talk about your travels? How did you do all of this? And I never realized back then, because I just went there. I didn't prepare anything. I just, out of the top of my head, I started talking about how I did it. And then the Rotterdam Conservatory immediately invited me to to give a workshop about this at the conservatory. And then I started realizing, hey, there is no um there's no, I mean, nowadays there's much more consciousness and much awareness about music business, but still sometimes, they invite like networking gurus, and people tell you how to fill in your text paper and how it works with publishing, all of that, which is great. But I know what a musician wants. A musician wants a gig, or a lot of gigs, and I know the shortcut. So then I realized, okay, this course, this thing, I really should make a thing out of it. So that's why, next to playing, which I prefer to do, to be honest, but I love to do this self management and networking for musicians course. But also because I'm traveling a lot, again, I decided to record a podcast. So I've already recorded like 11 short episodes. Like, they're all short with short tips. It's not like endless 2 hours talking, because that's way too much. People don't have the patience for that. But there are short episodes. You'll find it on my website. There is a link. You'll find everything. My website is brand new. You'll find all the links to my socials, to my music there. And you know, the half an hour went like this for me. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, please feel free to send me an email. You'll find everything on the website again. Please follow me on my socials, on my YouTube channel, and everything. And um, feel free to contact me if you have any questions. And again, I would like to thank the great Gail Boyd with her wonderful initiative to invite me. And thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And have a beautiful day wherever you are. Thank you. All my love.